Obviously, it's a very lengthy day. Some of the most contentious items are yet to come. Give us a small preview of how you think this afternoon may go.
Well, one of the funny things about City Council versus other orders of government is I literally have no idea what's going to happen on any given item before we actually debate it. And really interestingly, with the secondary suites in particular, we normally approve 80-85% of them, I think. Today, though, there's a lot of them with some pretty angry neighbors, and sometimes the angry neighbors do sway the vote. So, who knows? We could approve them all, we could approve none of them. I really don't have any good idea. What's really interesting to me are the two notices of motion at the end of the agenda today, both dealing with secondary suites. Councillor Keating's notice of motion is an admittedly imperfect way to at least move the ball down the field a little bit, something Council has not been able to do. I signed it because it's got some good stuff in it, though I do admit, I'm the first to admit, it's very imperfect. The question of the plebiscite is one that we really have to explore because, in a post-Brexit world, I would argue that most people would say to government, do your job. Don't require others to do it. Make the hard policy decisions and then put yourself up for election and see if people want to agree with it. And that's generally my feeling. But on this one, I'm pretty open. If this will actually end our logjam, then I'm willing to listen to the arguments to make it work. Some of what's been quoted in the press, that we would have a different secondary suite regimen on every block, depending on what the neighbors say, that's crazy. But if we want to look at the overall city, that's something we might want to look at.
How difficult is it to strike a balance between giving people what they want, those applying for secondary suite permits, and the angry neighbors who want nothing to do with anything ever?
Well, this really is a question of property rights. If you're a conservative thinker and you believe in property rights, then people should have the right to do with their property as they wish, as long as it doesn't adversely affect their neighbors. And we know it doesn't generally adversely affect their neighbors. So it's not really that hard, given that every other city in the country, except Burnaby, BC, and Calgary, have figured this out. Red Deer's figured it out. Edmonton's figured it out. And the right answer is you have some criteria, and administration determines whether or not you meet the criteria. And you don't have to come to council and bring your elderly mother, or say that you've recently gone through a divorce, or that you've got financial troubles because you lost your job, and literally beg for the right to do with your property what you should be able to do with your property.
So what's the soonest on Keating's motion where, let's say, the secondary reform did go through? What's the soonest we could see, these applications for, even in downtown, automatically not going to council and then say, yep, you got a suite?
It's really, really complicated. And in fact, believe it or not, the biggest impact of his motion would not be to reduce the number of secondary suite applications we have, because the vast majority of them are still in the band where they would be needed. But there's a bunch of other stuff in there around the licensing regimen, which is very interesting because it actually gives us the ability to give incentives for the owner to live there. The vast majority of people say that if the owner lives there, it's totally fine, I don't mind. So we can't legislate that, but there is a way to give a financial incentive for that, which I thought was very interesting. There's an amnesty in there on current illegal suites, which is also very interesting. If we have an incentive for people to bring their current illegal suites up to code and legalize them all in one fell swoop. So that's all super interesting. All of this is going to require some very creative legislative and bylaw drafting. I know administration is a little bit nervous about that, so it'll be many months before those bylaws come back, and then we'll have a giant public hearing and a big debate, and we'll see if the 8 people who signed the notice of motion, if they all vote for it today, will stick to it.
In the life of this council, do you think?
Oh, I should think so. I imagine sometime late this year, early 2017, we'll see some of those changes come forward.
Now, it seems to still divide regular rentals from secondary suites, especially with that whole licensing. Would regular landlords have to also then get this?
What an intuitive and smart question. That question was actually the reason the last version of this failed. Because a lot of members of council felt, well, geez, you're putting this extra requirement on someone who's renting 2 suites, but anybody can rent their whole house to a university fraternity without any of this kind of oversight. And that is, in fact, one of the challenges with it.
Is there any solution to that?
No. Up until the point when council just finally makes a decision to do what every other city in the country has done, and to understand that, we haven't had a poll on this in some years, but the last real big poll that I saw showed almost 80% of Calgarians in favor of my proposal to take this to administration rather than council. We even had a push poll done using really negative language to see if people would be opposed to secondary suites, and 67 or something percent of people were still in favor of having secondary suites legalized in their own neighborhood. So the public is really on side with this, and council just needs to get on side with them as well.
I know you're expecting something later this summer from the ethics advisor regarding councillors campaigning on their people's turf. Do you think something needs to be done sooner?
Well, I think everyone needs to be responsible about this. You know, you can campaign as much as you want. You know, people have already declared that they want to run. People have declared they want to run for mayor, and there's nothing stopping them from door knocking. The challenge is you can't use city resources to do it. And even if, regardless of what the ethics advisor says, I think that's just common sense. And I remember years ago we had councillors who were giving out fridge magnets and pencils with their name on them just before an election, saying, oh, that's just so people can contact their councillor. That doesn't always pass the smell test. Now, we are well off from an actual election, a lot of time to go. So if councillors are sending newsletters or fridge magnets or whatever in their current ward saying, call your councillor if you have a problem, I don't have a huge issue with that. That's one of the benefits of incumbency. But if you're using city resources and you're putting magnets and cards and so on in a riding you don't currently represent, I think most people would say that's campaigning and that's not fair, and using city resources and that's not right.
But why don't we have anything to be done about that?
Nothing. Court of public opinion. Up until, well, actually I shouldn't say that, because this afternoon we will be hopefully passing new terms of reference for the Integrity Commissioner, and then that will be an opportunity for if people are upset about that, for them to issue a complaint with the Integrity Commissioner.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
One last unrelated question.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So the National Council of Canadian Muslims are having a news conference today here in Calgary, and they're talking about condemning all forms of Islamophobia. I was wondering if you could are you concerned about Islamophobia in Calgary?
Well, you know, Calgary remains an incredibly diverse, incredibly welcoming place, and we're very lucky that issues of hatred or xenophobia against any group, whether Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-immigrants feeling, racism, you name it, are very, very rare, and in fact met with general condemnation from the city of Calgary, and I think that's a good thing. But I also think that this is something you've got to constantly be vigilant about, that you've constantly got to fight, and that good, decent people really have to stand up against this sort of thing. So good on them for doing